Good morning or good afternoon, depending on which time zone you're sitting in today. I'm Tim Ringo. I'm your opening keynote speaker for the SAP SuccessFactors Learning Symposium put on by Talent Team. And I'm coming to you from the far southwest of England, which is called Cornwall, for those of you who may not have been. We've just got out of lockdown here in the UK, and I've headed off on vacation, but I wouldn't want to miss this opportunity to be with you all today. So I'm very pleased to join you, and thank you to SuccessFactors and to Talent Team for having me come today. And I'm not going to focus on the pandemic too much. I think we've all had enough of it. It's taken up enough of our lives and our headspace. What I want to focus more on is looking forward into the future. So what are the things that are coming that we can all look forward to? Because we're in a very interesting time, particularly in the learning space. It's probably one of the most interesting times since the beginning of e-learning. I'm going to walk you through some of my thoughts on that, some of the research, and yeah, let's take some time to kind of see what's going on in the world of learning. But really, it's good to start at the kind of 50,000 foot level, which is really looking at a situation where people productivity for the past 10 years has been in decline. And I did some research on that, wrote a book on it, and we'll be using some of that as some of the background for today. But learning is absolutely key to solving this puzzle, and let's have a look. So first things first, let's look at the title. So today is about driving organizational change by improving people engagement and performance. And what we're going to outline is, how innovative learning programs prepare employees and leaders to thrive in the time of constant change. And we've been certainly through a lot of change recently. So, but not all of this is bad. Sometimes change comes along and knocks us on to a different path, one that we may not have chosen otherwise. And I believe, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll also believe that I think we've been knocked onto a more positive path. So let's have a look at some of the content. So first of all, a little bit about me. I have a 30-year career as a senior executive, leading HR management consulting and HR software engagements worldwide. So that's where my gray hair comes from, for doing this for a very long time. These days, I'm an author, board advisor, conference speaker, and workshop facilitator. My latest book, Solving the Productivity Puzzle, came out late 2020, turned out to be really timely. And I'm really proud and pleased to say that it's been shortlisted for Business Book of the Year 2021 by the Business Book Awards. A little about where I come from in terms of where I've worked. So I started out at Accenture, was there for 16 years. I was a senior partner there, recruited to IBM to lead the global human capital practice there. And then joined SAP SuccessFactors in 2014 and spent the last 5 or 6 years there. And I recently retired, or as I like to say, pro-tire, to spend more time writing and doing things like this, like speaking at these sorts of engagements. So that's a little bit about me. But let's get into the content. So, really, if we think about it, we're kind of in one of those situations where I believe technology is racing ahead of us, right? So if you look at human and technology progress, you go back to say 10,000 BC up to sort of about 1785. Human and technology progress has been pretty flat. You had kind of fire, the wheel, you had the printing press, and suddenly you get to about 1780s with the invention of the steam engine, and we just see a almost logarithmic increase in technology progress, and it really hasn't stopped. It's gone through sort of ups and downs during that period, and we're currently in a very accelerated time of change in terms of technology progress. But it's been something that hasn't been seen in human history really the past 200 years or so. So what has that done to humans? Well, you are here. We're seeing a situation where really the technology is racing ahead of us, and in many cases it's overwhelming us. And we're in one of those cycles where people and technology, the alignment, it just isn't there. And part of that is I think we've got away from investing heavily in aligning people to new technologies. We're sort of in a phase where we're rolling technology out for technology's sake. It's about compliance, automation. Really, when we're talking about technology and humans, we really should be looking at it more in terms of human-centric applications, things that make people better, that augments the human versus automates, that create situations where people can flourish. And I think that's really where we need to focus in terms of change. But this is what's called the productivity paradox. Well, you get fantastic technology. Many people say, well, shouldn't we have sort of huge increases in productivity? Well, we do on occasion, but quite often technology drives down productivity, only to see it come back up again later. And we're at one of those inflection points right now. But let's take a look at kind of productivity in the kind of long run. So, one of the reasons why I wrote Solving the Productivity Puzzle was because of an OECD paper that I saw in 2016 that was really very pessimistic. Essentially, their point was, we're going to see the average annual rate of GDP growth decline for the next 40 years. And the main reason they put forward for that was people productivity. And they said, essentially, organizations are not investing enough in aligning people to technology. Two, they're not spending enough and investing enough in changing processes to align to new technology. And then thirdly, they're not changing their organization structures to take advantage of digital technology. So certainly I agree with those three things, but I think that the idea that those aren't going to be fixed over the next 20 or 40 years, I really didn't agree with. So it really kind of inspired me to say, well, I should go have a deeper look at this because it seems overly pessimistic. So I agree those three things are happening. But I think there's a lot of organizations, particularly CEOs and senior executives, they absolutely get that they need to change these three things. And I think that's happening. And in fact, if you look at a paper from the World Economic Forum, which just came out last month, it showed a whopping 80% of employers are now intending to accelerate their plans to digitize their processes and change organization structures to allow for more flexible working. So, this is one of those situations where, a crisis has knocked us onto a different path. And that path looks like it might be a better one. It's kind of helped organizations and leaders of organizations to sort of wake up and see that we need to do something different. So, I think this is an interesting time in that I think perhaps we're going to finally break this cycle of downward, people productivity and create some increases in it going forward. Let's look at what that might look like. So there's a number of economists who are kind of in the optimist camp, as I like to call it, who say really we've kind of been more on a J curve, and we're actually on the verge of an upward trend in people productivity. Basically what they're saying is that we've kind of got through this most recent technological inflection, and that things like artificial intelligence and machine learning and organizations investing more in these and making technology more human centric, making technology more about helping people be better at their jobs, that we're on the cusp of what could be ultimately the biggest increase in human productivity that we've ever seen. So that's the optimist camp, and that's the sort of camp that I sit in based on my experience and in working in the HR business, my experience in working in the technology business. I'm definitely more of I think we're on an upward trend situation. But let me kind of go through some more content to see if you agree with me. So, one of the things when I sat down and looked at, not only the challenges the OECD outlined, but I saw a couple more challenges that I think are equally difficult, but hopefully we're starting to address now. So if you think about the workplace sort of circa 1992, it really doesn't look that different from what the workplace looks like in 2021 or 2022. It's, 30 years we've had a kind of PC on a desk, a keyboard, a mouse, and that's kind of what work has looked like. We've done that mostly in the office. There's been some home working before the pandemic. Obviously, that's increased dramatically. But if you think about it, over the past 30 years, work really doesn't look that different from the early digital age. And this is a real problem because when you look at it kind of, home, it's sort of like the Jetsons. So for those of you of a certain age, you would maybe remember the American kids cartoon called the Jetsons, who were a space age family that had all these gadgets that did all sorts of things for them. That made their food and did their shopping and coordinated their social lives. Well, guess what? We've kind of become the Jetsons. So at home, we're very technologically advanced, and the data shows that in our social lives and in our private lives, we're the most productive we've ever been. It's because of this sort of consumer grade, human-centric technology that's been put in place for us. But at work, we kind of go from home where we've got that, and we go to work, and it still looks very 1992. This is a real challenge, and that's why you're seeing a lot of organizations start to say, look, we need to make work and the technology more like home and make it more human centric, about helping people be better, not be all about automation and compliance. And so that's kind of where we're at today. And I think it's quite encouraging to see that this is one of the things that's starting to get addressed. Another thing that I had to look at, and I think is really important to understand, is that I'm a baby boomer, right? So you can forgive me for saying this, but why don't we just work harder? Why don't we just throw more hours, more people at the problem? Well, in my research, I found over and over again, from think tanks, from Deloitte, from McKinsey's, a lot of studies recently that's showing that people really are most productive with work weeks that are around between 30 and 34 hours a week, which suggests a 4-day week, right? And we all sit back and say, well, why do we work 5 days a week? It's because it's always been that way, we say, right? So, but some organizations and even local governments and federal governments are starting to experiment with this idea of a 4-day work week. And some of the early data that's come in over the past couple of years is really encouraging to show that, when you shorten the work week, you actually create more focus of people because they've got less time to get things done. And it isn't about filling up a whole week, it's about focusing on the work. And there's other factors in play here. But the bottom line is that you should keep in mind that when you get past sort of 32 hours per week, you sort of hit diminishing returns, and data over and over again shows us. So we can't just throw more people at this. We just can't throw more hours at it. We have to work smarter. So, why think about it in terms of, not just working harder? Well, I think we have to change, and we have to, take this opportunity to not waste the crisis. And one of the problems I ran into when I first sat down to write the book was I went and looked up in my, business textbook from when I went to university, what was the definition of productivity? And it's here, it's on the left, which essentially says various measures of the efficiency of production. Productivity measures expressed as the ratio of output to inputs used in a production process. Well, I sort of sat and I looked at that and I thought, well, that sounds very 19th century, right? That's humans on a farm picking fruit, or that's humans in a factory producing widgets. And that's just not what work looks like today. So if we're only measuring on that very one-dimensional approach, we're really missing, I think, a larger part of the productivity puzzle. And what should it look like? So I sat down and thought, right, I need to come up with a definition that's more 21st century, more encompassing of what's really involved in productivity in current times. And I came up with the following. So see if you agree. Getting stuff done that measurably improves the economic and human interests of organizations and society at large. So it's not just about people producing and that creates value and wealth. It's looking at it in a more three-dimensional stage. So obviously there's a physical side to it, the economic bit, but there's the human interest, there's the human at the core of it. And also then it's the organizations they work for and the society they live in. And it's really a broader thing that we have to look at in terms of productivity. So what does that mean if we kind of take that down, a level? And really I kind of broke it down into, I think, 3 really simple buckets. So let's have a look here. So there's always a value piece, right? There has to be a fiscal side to productivity: inputs, outputs, measured value, wealth creation. If we look at it today, even, the communist Chinese are capitalists. So, we all need to keep track of these things. But there's a couple of other elements that I think are really important that drive that value but get left out of the equation. So the first one is what I think we all call engagement, but what I define is, a workplace that's purpose-driven. It gives employees the opportunity to flourish. So it's the kind of workplace that you get up in the morning and say, hey, I want to go to work and I want to do the best I can. And those workplaces are purpose-driven. They have a purpose that people, buy into. It has leadership that helps them develop in their personal skills, but also their career. And it gives people the opportunity to really flourish and grow. And that's where everybody, who doesn't want to work in an organization like that? Well, guess what? When you have that kind of work environment, it leads to more innovation, right? So people in this type of work environment have the headspace to step back and think, well, what about new products? What about new services? What about a new way of doing things? And that's what we see in these organizations that create these kind of purpose-driven organizations. Well, they're highly innovative. And guess what? When you think up new services, new products, or new ways of doing things, you drive more value, right? So it creates this kind of flywheel, a virtuous cycle of, one impacts the other. And so we need to really think about how we measure and how we set out productivity targets in this sort of context. It's not just all about the dollars and the widgets. It's broader. It's broader than that. And I think this creates a more exciting sort of workplace. And this is where things are heading. And I think a lot of senior executives get this right. And this is why I think we're seeing more people move into the optimist camp, because we're starting to redefine what productivity means. So as I said earlier, we need to work smarter, and we're going to have to do that to get the economy back on its feet. And I think it's already happening. I think that now that we're on this new path, I think people are adjusting quickly. But I think there's more work to do. And this is a quote unquote equation that I came up with that I think is a pretty good framework to kind of show, what organizations that do get people engagement, innovation, and performance right, what do they look like? Well, they look like the following. Essentially, they get the right people with the right skills in the right place at the right time, and really important, with the right motivation. And this creates what I call PEIP, or people engagement, innovation, and performance, which ties then back to this new definition of productivity. And I mean, who doesn't want to work in this kind of organization? So, but let's be clear, not every organization can 100% of the time get this equation in balance. But if you can get it 50%, 60%, 70%, employees appreciate organizations that try to get right people, right skills, right place, right time, right motivation, and do it most of the time. And that's a really fantastic place to work. But it doesn't stop there. If we start to then add in, this is where the important inflection point is in terms of where I think we are right now, which is AI and machine learning. People see it as, oh, well, it's going to replace humans. I think it's going to be the opposite. I think we're going to see humans harness AI and machine learning, just like we harnessed the steam engine back in 200 years ago, to drive greater achievements and greater productivity. And so this is one of the reasons why I think we're on the verge of I think a really fantastic historic level of people productivity. And there's a lot of economists who agree with that we are starting to solve this equation more and more and do it better. And I think this is very exciting for our future. So think differently, do differently, apply a framework that helps create that kind of place that we all want to work, right? And I think what's really important, and this is what this presentation is about, which is, where does learning fit in? Right. And learning is absolutely critical. I mean, it's no good to give somebody performance objectives and say, let me see you at the end of the year, and I hope, give you good luck. You want to give somebody their targets and then give them, learning that helps them achieve that. Right. But learning is changing how we do that. And we'll come onto that in just a moment. I want to talk first, though, about, what does a good employee experience look like? Well, if you got a situation where enterprise strategy, that's the CEO's job, right? They create that, they throw it in the organization, and then people are supposed to execute on it. Well, guess what? Organizations that are very effective at attracting and retaining, motivating and developing, connecting, enabling, and then deploying and managing that human capital in this kind of integrated set of processes and technology, you get this integrated employee experience, which, guess what? That makes people more productive. And it makes it more likely that you can achieve your organization's target. So this is what I call, and what lots of people call this, called the integrated employee experience. This is what we mean by good employee experience. So if we kind of break that down into, well, what's that mean in HR? Let's get really specific. Well, it gives HR an opportunity to create transformational change that's sustainable, right? When we can do this really, really well. And the processes that we're talking about are the ones that we all know and love, right? So recruitment and onboarding, getting the right people in, performance and goals, giving them their targets and set out their rewards if they achieve them. Motivate and develop. This is where learning comes in, right? So learning and collaboration, really important part of the puzzle here. And then workforce management and succession, getting right people in the right place, helping people move up in their career. This is what's really, really important. And when you create this kind of environment, which I think first is a mindset, two is a set of processes that does this, and third, and I purposely put technology last because you have to have the other two first. Then you put the technology in place that helps create this human experience, digital experience, right? And this is where, success factors is fantastically, capable in doing this, and why it's one of my all-time favorite platforms, and why I went to work for the company. We have the technology to do this today, but it isn't a technology first thing; it's a mindset, and then it's a set of processes, and then we put the technology in to do it. And guess what? When you're an organization that does this really, really well, you can create high levels of enterprise performance and do it consistently. But you know what the glue is? The most important part of all of this for me, in my experience over 30 years, is learning and collaboration. This is kind of the glue that pulls everything together. You can't attract and retain, motivate and develop, connect, enable, deploy, and manage without a robust approach to give people the skills they need. It's the critical component in my mind. So as we kind of bring this down, into levels of detail, this is what we mean by an integrated employee experience. This is where learning and effective learning and innovative learning sits and drives this new way of thinking and doing. So I think it's all well and good to say, well, learning and collaborations, innovation is a good thing, but I think it's worth, before we look at it in a little bit more detail, to kind of say, well, what's the definition? And I quite like this one that the OECD, even though they're kind of in the pessimist camp, I like this definition they've come up with of, what an innovative organization is. And as you can see here, it's where you continually implement new or significantly improved product, processes, marketing methods, organizational methods, practices, et cetera, and create a new workplace experience. And I totally agree with that definition. I think it's pretty succinct, and that's what the goal should be in terms of what we're trying to do, right? But then what does a innovative and productive organization look like from the people's perspective, right? Well, the OECD has some definitions for that, and I think these are great too, very succinct. Employees can tackle problems from new angles and in new ways, and there's no punishment for doing that. In fact, it's encouraged to say, think of new ways of doing things. Take some risks. So employees are supported in developing those new ideas from the beginning to the end. Whether they succeed or fail is not the important thing. It's that we try these new things and we develop them and get behind them. And then third, organizations are flexible in adapting to these new ways of doing things in their operations and in their technology and their processes. And I totally agree. I think this is an innovative workplace culture, and I'm sure you could add some things to it, but I think this is just kind of a clear, concise way to say, well, what do we mean by an innovative organization? What do we mean by an innovative workplace culture? And I think we can probably agree that these are three pretty good definitions. But how does that then fit into the learning space? So let's take a look, and I'm going to take a quick drink of water here while we do this. So the following are what I think are three key success factors, pun intended, in today's innovative learning. So let's have a look at these, the three that I've learned and where some of my gray hairs come from. So first and foremost, always in my mind, is cultural. So, the thing that's changing dramatically, finally, after, 20 years of what we've heard about e-learning, I think we're finally seeing the democratization of learning content and the access to that content. So we're realizing that not everyone learns content in the same way, but everybody needs to have access to that in a way that fits for them, right? So I think we're democratizing learning, both the content and the access. And part of that is a big innovation that's been in the works for a long time, but I think it's finally coming to the forefront, which is putting learning in the flow of work. So not having training culturally as it's an event, you go online, you do this thing, or you go to this classroom, you do this thing. It's learning happening almost like performance support. It's happening in the job. It's in the flow of your work. And I think we can all agree that the best way to learn is learning by doing, and then having that support. So learning that supports that flow of work and provides the right learning at the right time, but also has this other element, which is the collaboration piece, which is learning in real time from experts. And young people are exceptionally good at this. They don't want to necessarily go sit in a classroom. They would love to click a button, find an expert and say, hey, can I get some time in your diary, or can I get a few minutes now, and have the technology to do that. Culturally, this is how, these are the success factors in terms of how innovative learning is done and how it's changing. And I think you all would probably agree that these are the things that are really exciting that are happening at the moment. And I think this is going to have a fundamental impact on learning going forward. The other one is embracing new technology. So a focus on human-centric digital tools, right? Again, back to this idea of the tools are consumer grade. They're easy to use. It's intuitive. It's not about compliance and automation. It's about augmenting the human, making them better at their job, and making them happier at their job, right? And part of this is the emergence of two new categories of technology. LMS, which has been around for a long time, but LXP. The new bit is the combining of these two things, right? To create this immersive experience where you've got the system of record, which is the LMS, you've got the kind of engine, which is the LMS, and then on top of that, you've got the LXP, the learning experience platform that makes it consumable, very easily consumable, and it's personalized to the human, not to a group of people, but down to you specifically. And then it uses AI and machine learning to create this adaptive learning. So it learns how you learn, right? And this whole idea that as time goes on, your learning platform gets better and better at supporting you as you go forward. And in many cases, you don't even notice it supporting you, right? And that's kind of where things are headed, this kind of intelligent performance support kind of learning. So embrace the new technology. The last is, and I think really important, if you're going to embark on a change program, it's really important to have that compelling purpose for the change, right? So people want a purpose to rally around, and we should give it to them, right? And I think every organization has got a purpose that's exciting. You just got to discover it, put it up front, and help people buy into it. And part of that is communicate, right? So you can never over communicate the purpose for a compelling case for change, right? And that's really, really important. Which really gets to the next bit, that once you're on that road and you're creating an innovative learning environment, it's about then measure progress and celebrate it, right? So measure progress not for compliance, but measure it to show how we're doing, how we could do better. And then, it's really important to stop and celebrate the big wins. It's very easy to kind of move on to the next thing, but I think it's really important to say, wow, we were here and we did these things, we changed culture, we changed technology, and now we're here, and measure the real impact of that on humans, but also on business performance. So from my perspective, these are the key, quote unquote, success factors in today's innovative learning. So let's look at a couple of examples and see what you think. So, but before we do that, I just want to hammer home this point, which is that and this is a model that Josh Bersin uses, and you've probably seen, but I love it. I call it kind of the kind of learning experience sandwich, which essentially says, bottom up, we've kind of built our HRMSs, HR management systems, we've got our LMSs, and that's created the foundation. But now we're developing sort of top down, and we're creating these experience platforms. So, content discovery. So this idea of going in LMS and peck and find has really become discover and perform, right? And that's the exciting bit of this kind of melding together of an LXP and an LMS to create an engine and an experience platform so that people discover and perform, and the days of peck and find around a system to try to get something, those days are gone. So, if people cannot, experience it in a positive sense, they're not going to do it, right? And so let's use a couple of examples. So where have we come from and where are we going? So I had the privilege, and this seems like a very long time ago, in 1999 to team up with BT for 3 years. And I helped their retail organization and their HR organization design an e-learning program called Experience. And the program was, and this is, it's hard to believe, but in 1999, when BT did a survey of their employees, they found less than 10% of them understood what the World Wide Web was, that understood what IP meant, that understood what broadband was. It was shocking because BT was just about to come to market with all of these products, and we're making a big bet on these things, right? But only 10% of the workforce understood these things. So we put in place an e-learning program, which essentially the idea was, well, the way to get people up to speed on what the internet is put them on the internet and get their learning there, right? So we did some initial really simple e-learning modules to help people understand It's kind of click and learn and take some tests kind of things. So to kind of learn what the key things were about the internet, and then what products BT was creating. And then on the back of that, for all of the customer facing people, we created online simulations of a customer conversation. So people could practice a conversation of educating a customer on what what broadband was, or what an IP address was, or these really simple things that we could sort of take for granted today. So this program rolled out to 20,000 customer facing people, and we did it in a year. We got everybody through the program, and it had a tremendous change to the organization. After that, 90% of those customer facing people said they could talk confidently to customers about products. You may have seen it if you lived in Britain at the time, because other telcos then adopted AT&T in the US. I went over there and helped them with that. It was really quite extraordinary in an early use. But it was learning in an old way, right? It was an event. You had to go to it, schedule time. You went onto the PC. So it was innovative, but it wasn't kind of learning in the flow of work. So we get to today, and I think what's going to be an award-winning program at Royal Mail Group. And you're going to get to hear more about this from James Barton. So I'm not going to steal his thunder today, but I think it's a great example. It's a very similar situation as experience at BT. It's called the Fridge at Royal Mail. And essentially their goal is to change the culture. They want to become the world class delivering parcels and mail, both in the UK and Europe. And they want to do this at scale. They've got, like BT, they've got tens of thousands of employees, a lot of people who need new skills and development. And the great thing is that Royal Mail, they're teaming up with Talent Team and with Success Factors to really put all those things together that I talked about earlier, right? In terms of cultural, technological processes, all those kinds of things. And they're creating a new kind of learning environment, which has these aspects that we talked about. So essentially what they're creating, which is really exciting, is a blend of LXP and LMS for powerful personalization engine to basically use what's in the LMS in terms of user data to then teach the platform to provide the right content to people at the right time in the flow of their work, right? So this is basically taking what we did at BT and bringing it very much into the 21st century, with artificial intelligence and machine learning. And James is going to talk to you about this later, but I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a hugely award-winning program, but this is the direction, this is where we're heading, right? But it's taken 20 years, right? We kind of got stuck in this using e-learning as kind of just an online version of what we do in classrooms. Well, that's changing now, right? It's moving into this kind of learning where it's happening all the time, and it's almost, you don't even notice it, right? And I think this is really, really exciting stuff. So congratulations to the team at Royal Mail and also to Success Factors and Talent Team in terms of helping them with achieve their vision. But I want to end on this because this all sounds really, hopefully, very positive, and I've sort of got you into the optimist camp. But I just want to be really clear about one thing. It's absolutely, I think, very exciting, and it's clear that we've been knocked onto this different path, and it's going to be a more positive path and a very different working environment going forward. But we have to keep in mind that it requires money, it requires investment, and as you can see here from this data, nearly 80% of CHROs are now expecting a big increase in the investment into processes, platforms, et cetera, because of the pandemic and the changes that has created. But if you look at the CFO and what they think about that, they're in a different space. It's only about half of them saying, yeah, I think we're going to invest more in these types of things. And this is only from November 2020, so it's pretty recent data. And as you can see here, 75% CHROs up here in the left-hand corner say, CHROs say we're going to invest in employee skilling. Well, only 39% of CFOs say that. So my message here to you is not everybody is on the same page about this revolution that's coming. And for all of us in the human capital space, it's really important that we learn how to make the value case for this, right? We have to say, we need to go from here to here, from A to B. This is the roadmap to get there. And then we have to create that value case which says if we invest X, we're going to get Y. And be really succinct and clear in that to really get that number up in terms of CFOs who own the money, right? who will invest in these things. It's not automatic because the world has changed that we're going to be able to get the money for these things. And at places like Royal Mail and other, big companies, they are starting to make some headway in this. But I think I would leave you with this last message that says we've still got work to do to convince people to invest in people, to invest in helping them get aligned to this fantastic technology, and what I think is going to be a very, very bright future. Okay, so I just want to thank everybody for listening. Here's my contact details if you're interested. My website, timringo.com, and I'm on Twitter as well. And I just want to say thanks for listening, and I'll be ready to take some questions shortly. Thank you very much.